So let's kick it off with a good question, a question that we get asked a lot, which is £35,000 enough to get a buy-to-let up north? And quite frankly, this amount of money that I used to kind of recommend that you have to buy a buy-to-let, if you go back just a few years ago, was so much less. And as time has gone on, every year I feel like I'm saying a higher amount of money is required. In short, I would say that if you're looking to do a buy, refurbish, refinance style project in the north, or in, let's say, Wales, let's say in kind of cheaper areas, but not too cheap, okay? We want to make sure we're buying in good areas where there's potential capital growth. Well, in those instances, you'd be looking at maybe like needing about £60,000 of capital at least. And that's thinking about, the 25% deposit, it's all of your fees, it's your refurb, and it's pairing that alongside 75% loan to value bridging finance. So that's what I'd say for buy, refurbish, finance. You've specifically said here, buy to let up north. So let's assume you're meaning turnkey buy-to-let property. Again, if you're buying a turnkey buy-to-let property, you might be buying, let's say, £100,000. If you bought a 2 or 3 bed terrace at £100,000, put down a 25% deposit alongside a mortgage, well, that's £25,000 for the deposit. You've then got stamp duty, solicitors, and all the associated fees with buying a property. So now you might be looking at definitely over 30. You might be looking at like £35,000 in that instance. Obviously, if you then look to buy something via a sourcer, you might have a sourcing fee on top of that as well. So very good question, very simple question, and that will help a lot of people out, because often I get people going, yeah, I've got £20,000, I really want to buy my first buy-to-let. And if you'd have asked me 4 or 5 years ago, that would have been fine. But now that is certainly not enough money. £35,000 or over is what I'm recommending. Next question, how does bridging work? I'm thinking of using it for a project, but not sure on how it works. Okay, really good question, because a lot of new investors also worry about using bridging because people tell them not to use it and that it's massively risky. But from my experience, bridging is actually a very useful tool that you need to use as a property investor if you want to grow, particularly if you want to grow at speed. Now, the best way to think of bridging finance is like a short-term, expensive mortgage. And you're basically using it to bridge the gap of buying a rundown property to renovating it and then refinancing it when it's no longer a rundown property. Hence the name bridging, because it's bridging the gap between the purchase and the refinance, or the purchase and the sale. And people use it for lots of different reasons in property, but that's probably the one that a lot of people watching this video will resonate to. So how does bridging actually work? Well, bridging isn't like a mortgage in the sense that you automatically, go out, have a meeting with a broker, get a mortgage agreed in principle, and then you can go and offer on things. Although that's how some people do it. That's typically the route you do it if you go with like a mainstream bridging lender, so like a more common one. But if you do go down that route, just be aware there's a lot of additional fees. They'll try and sting you for the fact that you are a kind of new investor and you're going down that route. All I've found that when people use that, or when I did at the start, is it's more expensive. They have all these additional attached fees, like arrangement fees, valuation fees. They want you to bring in a third-party solicitor and they'll charge you £1,300 here. All of these different things. Whereas I've actually found working with specialist bridging lenders who, albeit will have a higher interest rate monthly, they just are so much easier to work with. They're actually pragmatic in their approach to, we know you want to buy a property, we'll do our homework on it to make sure you bought it at the right price. If you have, then we'll figure out if you're able to pay the interest, and we believe that you can pay the interest each month. If you can't, we'll take the interest payments from you up front, but we'll still give you the loan on the basis that it's a good deal. And, they just don't have all of this extra red tape around everything. They don't have all these crazy fees around everything. Yes, it's expensive. They're all expensive, but that's because they're providing a service. And the exchange of value there is that you can then buy rundown properties at good prices, but they're going to charge you a high interest rate for it and add some fees. So that's how it works. I would always look at it from the perspective of, right, if I'm looking to buy a property, it's £100,000. I could probably get 75% loan to value bridging on this. if they take the interest from me up front, they are going to knock that off of the 75% loan that they're giving me. So let's say they want to take £5,000 of interest payments from me up front. They're going to now knock that off the £75,000 loan, meaning that if I bought it at 100,000, I then have to put in £30,000 as a deposit plus the other fees of buying. So it works like that in terms of going and getting the bridging. Then when you're on the bridging, you're either going to pay it monthly, or you're going to have paid it up front, like I just mentioned, or you're going to roll it up and pay it at the end. Monthly or upfront are probably the most common ones that I come across or have done myself. And then when I'm in a project, I'm just trying to keep things moving quickly. Where people get stuck or don't like bridging is because they don't move quickly when they bought the deal. And realistically, if a bridging lender comes to you and they say, do you want a 6-month or a 12-month loan? You always say 12 months because you don't pay additional for going down the 12-month route, because you only ever pay for the months that you have the loan. So I always say, yeah, I'll take 12 months, please. And then I'm trying to get off of it after like month 3 or 4 if I'm doing a buy, refurb, refinance deal. And you just pay a small exit fee, but you only pay for the months that you're using it effectively. Property is a passive investment, true or false? Well, I feel like that was a loaded one, as many people advertise it as passive, as we know, and it is relatively passive is what I might say, but it's not fully passive. Okay, for example, in the last week, I've had 2 properties come up with maintenance problems, in which then obviously we've arranged for the teams to go around there to resolve those. So it's definitely not passive in the sense you're never going to do anything. But I think in relation to the kind of, I guess, the terms of what you earn versus the amount of effort that you have to put in, it is relatively passive, I guess you could say. Okay, the amount of money that you can earn for 11 months of the year without a problem, and then obviously have to solve a problem on the 12th month of the year, is high, and you're only having to get involved in that 1 month or that one thing that comes up. So I would say that it is relatively passive, but let's be honest, it's just not, putting £100,000 in stocks and leaving it and forgetting about it for a year. It's, very active in the sense of you've got to seek and buy it. You've got to then obviously uplift the value. You don't have to, but you have to try and uplift the value if you want to be a successful investor. Then got to find someone to live in it. You've then got to maintain that property, and you've got to maintain everything around it. So like arranging insurance every year, refinancing every few years. So in comparison like that, it's low in terms of passiveness, but it is high in my opinion in terms of like most months. I don't do anything on most properties which earn me rent and make a profit. So that's my opinion.